Hi, in this tutorial we will be going through a very simple example of how init args can be used to automatically provide client components with the objects that they depend on. To start, let's take a look at the code for the client class. Our client depends on two objects for its functionality. The first one is an object of type string, and the second one an object of type iLogger. We have used Unity's built-in serialize field attribute to expose the string field in the inspector. This has allowed us to configure the string that should be injected for each client separately. The second object that the client depends on is an interface type. Because of this, we cannot expose it in the inspector by simply adding the serialize field attribute to it. Additionally, in this case, we don't want to inject a separate iLogger object to each of our clients. Instead, we want there to be just one iLogger object which all clients will use. We can use init args to achieve this. The first thing we'll need to do is to modify the client class by listing the types of all the objects that the client wants injected to it as generic type parameters of its base class. To get the code to compile, we'll need to import types from the sysus init namespace. We will also need to implement the init method through which the client will receive all the objects that it depends on. And finally, we will need to change from using the awake method to overriding onAwake instead. This method gets called at the end of the awake function after the client has received the objects that it depends on in its init function. Next, let's jump to a class that implements the iLogger interface that we can inject to our clients. Here we will need to add the service attribute to the class. This tells init args that it should automatically create a single instance of this class and inject it to all the clients that require it. We will also need to specify that the object should be registered as a service type of type iLogger. By default, services are registered using the concrete type of the class. Since the creator depends on an object of type iLogger, we want the service type to match this. Note that it is possible to add multiple instances of the service attribute to one class. When this is done, only a single instance of the class will still get created. However, this service can then be received by clients that depend on any of the service types and any of the attributes. If you want the service object to be retrieved from the scene hierarchy instead of a new instance being created, you can set find from scene to true. If you want the service object to be loaded from a resources folder, that is also possible. If you don't want the service to be created immediately when the game starts, but only when the first client that depends on it is loaded, then you can set lazy init to true. Alright, let's try running our code to see if everything works as expected. Success! A single instance of the logger class now gets injected to both our clients. If we look at our client in the inspector, we can see that a new init section has appeared. When we see a green check mark in the init section, it means that our client should be able to receive all the objects that it depends on during its initialization. If we go back to our logger class and remove the service attribute from it, then we will no longer see the green check mark. This indicates that no services will be getting injected to this client. And this concludes our tutorial. Thank you for watching. In the next video, we will be taking a more in-depth look at what can be done using the init section.